In 2026, more than ever, it's important to bring resilience to a supply chain.
So outsourced manufacturing is really the cheapest, easiest way to start. One of the big mistakes foreign companies are doing, which they learn quite quickly also, is to try to work on the outsourcing market here without a local partner.
Hello everyone, welcome to this new video. In today's video, we're gonna discuss about outsource manufacturing or setting up your own operation in Asia. I have Pietro here bringing 20 plus years of experience into Vietnam, but not only. Pietro have done a lot of projects in the whole ASEAN. So hopefully if you are looking into building up your own supply chain in Asia, setting up an assembly line type of workshops, or you are even more willing to invest massively and set up a full industrial factory. In this video, we're gonna go more into what you should choose, why you should choose, as well as the risks and pitfalls that you may encounter along the way. Pietro, it's a pleasure to have you today.
Thank you, Guillaume. Pleasure to be here.
We're gonna discuss with Pietro about outsourced manufacturing in Vietnam. In 2026, more than ever, it's important to bring resilience to a supply chain. For example, you are a company in Europe, you are having your own factory. It can be interesting to look into either building your supply chain or maybe setting up your factory somewhere else. And today I want to take this time to bring up this discussion. Maybe question number one that everyone may have: why would you look into setting up a production somewhere or looking at building up your own supply chain outside of your main market?
Yes, thank you, Guillaume. We can divide this in two sections in the matter of fact. Companies are having their own production facilities and not outsourcing at all, or they are already outsourcing. And today we have seen a lot of demand from those companies who already are outsourcing and have made the strategic choice of continuing with outsourcing and who are looking to build the new supply chains outside of China.
Now, in terms of the differences between just purely looking at partners, so looking at a company that have already an existing facility and just somehow rent the production versus building up your own operation in a certain market, what are the main nuances and differences?
Oh yes, there is a big difference in this. It all goes to the investments what the company has to do. So outsourced manufacturing is really the cheapest, easiest way to start to practice and learn about the outsourcing, for example, in Vietnam. Investing into own factory is a much longer project, takes much more money, and really needs to be main strategy of the company. Although in Vietnam, setting up your own small scale or medium scale manufacturing is quite easy. This is due to the available rental factories and things like that. So you don't necessarily have to build anything here, just the team and rental facilities.
So is there any hybrid model that can also be found, either, as you explained it a little bit, an assembly line that will be only doing some type of operations that could also bring some type of IP in a certain way and control over your production, versus a pure outsource model where there is only outsiders, I would say, contractors? Yes. Is there something in between that can be found?
There is kind of something in between. This comes especially in the garments industry, where companies are leasing or renting for the full year sewing lines. So it means that one sewing line from beginning to the end quality control, there is a rental sewing line. So the factory owner is providing the service and charging for that lease. This happens also in some cases that the customer is leasing the full factory capacity. And this is something which is like your own factory, your own manufacturing, but you are buying it as an outsourced service from the factory owner who handles all the HR and the running operations of that factory.
So it's a bit, as you say, a CM type of model, cut
Yes.
and make for
Yeah.
the fabric and for the garments. For electronic, I think maybe it could be interesting to also bring an example of maybe North African companies that could
Yeah.
also rent capacity, SMT line in Asia and maybe
Yeah.
in Vietnam.
That is also happening in electronics, in PCBA. This is happening. So we have traders also who are buying capacity and then reselling it to the final customers. PCBA is something which is happening always in one line, which is not the case, for example, in steel works or furniture works, where the manufacturing is different. It's not lined like this. Electronics, you can have like, company can have like 5 SMT lines, and they can rent maybe one line out, and the 4 remaining are for their own other customers.
Okay, so if you are a manufacturer yourself or you are looking at capacity somewhere else, how does it usually work in terms of the relationship and then also contract-wise? Is it you come up with a certain predictability into a certain volume or orders, and then you agree with the factory that, okay, they're going to put you a certain number of machine and resources? Have you done such operation?
Okay, so in a typical outsourcing, you are making products and you have a price from the factory for the product. So you are buying only the needed capacity to make your products. You are not leasing any lines or any factories. That's one model. The other model is this, like you rent a manufacturing line, and then independently what you are producing there, the price is the same. So you have 2 different approaches. You can negotiate with the factory, what would it cost for me to lease for 1 year your sewing line? I need this amount of sewers, I need the quality control, I need the team leaders and the middle management there. And then you have a pack which is operating for you, but is handled and operated by the factory owner.
Now, I would like to bring a bit more discussions about the main difficulties and then mistakes that companies may encounter if they want to look into diversifying their supply chain and looking at partners. What could be some of the trade-off of this model? The first one that can come in my mind is for IP. Let's say you work with a factory, and we had a case lately in a discussion with someone coming to our office saying, I've been engaging with a Chinese factory and they stole my ID, they try to re-engineer and they try to basically copy what I have built for years and trying to directly to sell it. That could be a first thing, but what could be other trade-off of outsourcing overseas?
I would like to come to that IP issue also first. So yes, that is always a risk. It's also a risk in Vietnam, but during the long years we have been in manufacturing, we have not seen it very much. Vietnamese companies are typically more manufacturing oriented and want to stay there than to develop their own brands and try to sell a copied product out of Vietnam. So I don't see it a very high risk, but it's still there also. You never know. The other thing is that you need to have suppliers who are capable of handling the whole production. It is very common in Vietnam that you have the supplier and then you have the subcontractor for the supplier. This was typical years ago, for example, in surface treatment in steel industries. So you had the company who made the steel products, and then you had the company who made the anodization or painting separately. 2 separate companies, maybe 100 meters from each other, but still 2 separate companies. This poses the problem of quality control, which is essential in Vietnam also. You need to be able to do inline inspections, final inspections. You need to know exactly how is the company, who is the subcontractor. So this is a problem. Although the primary supplier takes the responsibility of the whole project, it is more difficult to handle this from the customer's point of view in all things, and who is responsible then for delays and things like that. But over the years I have been in Vietnam, the suppliers are more and more capable of doing everything from A to Z. So this kind of behavior, like having 4 different subcontractors to produce one order, is lesser and lesser. But we have seen this happening recently, major problems also at the same time, because lead times have been longer and delays have occurred because of this.
Is there any problem that can also arise in terms of availability of raw material? For example, you choose the wrong country and the wrong market to outsource. Then after, when you have actually the production ramp up, you finally realize that they rely too much on certain raw material that must be imported, that will occur input in terms of delay just to get access to the raw material, and then in the end, finally, the end price you will get a premium on that. Is there things that can also be a certain trade-off by choosing the wrong market?
It is, yes. We have to remember Vietnam, for example, is relying heavily in imported raw materials. If we take steel sector, for example, metal components like this, there they have domestic production, decent amount of domestic production, but all kind of special matters like hardogs and those have to be imported. The major trade partner for Vietnam in raw materials is definitely China. China because of the capacity, and China also because they are next to Vietnam. The lead times, the transportation times are very quick. The major problem is if the suppliers in China have lead time problems, production problems. But this is a thing which has to be taken in consideration when selecting the outsourcing country also. But it's not the most important thing. Quality of the suppliers, their quality systems, lead times, capacities, competencies, those are still very important comparing to this. Raw materials are moving between countries. So delays can occur, but normally they are not the major hiccup.
Okay, so basically to solve those issues, first doing a deep assessment about the country's capabilities, choosing the right market, to also control that aspect of the subcontractor that you explained earlier, maybe also looking into doing not just one layer of partners, but also looking into where could be the potential subcontractors that the main contractor to be working with. So basically for each type of product categories or ranges of products, you are also doing a deep assessment to understand who could be working for basically your own production through the contractor. And then in the end, as you emphasize also in terms of having the IP and having the control, building your own operation, so having maybe a team that can be your own in-house team that you could be putting in the right time zone, or using an external partner to also manage the relationship with your part contractors and also subcontractors could be a way to solve those issues, prevent delays, and make sure that your production will move accordingly.
Yeah, I would say that one of the big mistakes foreign companies are doing, which they learn quite quickly also, is to try to work on the outsourcing market here without a local partner. You need somebody on the ground here. You need somebody who's taking care of lead times and following up the suppliers, providing you quality control services, final inspections, and these kind of things. When you have such a team, it helps your daily life very much, indeed. What comes to the other point, I think, and I know that there are services who can be hosting your own teams locally here also. This means that you might have your own staff, permanent staff here, without creating any company at that point, without having all the bureaucracy which is needed in Vietnam when you run a company here. And you simply pay a monthly fee, and somebody is taking care of everything, payroll and all the things what you need. And this is an intermediary solution between outsourcing and setting up your own operations in Vietnam. It's more like outsourcing plus one with your own team and handling. This requires, however, that you have a sufficient volume to cover the costs what are involved in this. But for example, for customers from North America, the time difference to Vietnam is for the East Coast 12 hours. So it makes it very difficult to work and cooperate together unless you have your team which is in the same time zone here available for you.
Okay, so we've been speaking a lot about outsourcing manufacturing, so basically renting the capacity from an existing industrial partners. Now, what about setting up your own operation? Because basically that's also the next step and probably more suitable for companies that are looking 5 to 10 years ahead.
Yeah.
They know about the growth of, for instance, Vietnam. They
Yeah.
know that in terms of infrastructure, in terms of local capabilities, there will be way more opportunities to take in the next 5 to 10 years, for example, and then they will be willing to invest. For companies that have this mindset, what could be basically the steps also to follow in terms of where are the main clusters, how to also understand about where you should set up your own operation, and also the hiring, I think, is also a very important aspect into, do you need to bring your own people so you can help with the ramp up and you can also train local Vietnamese here? What could be the strategy that you would advise for companies?
I say always that well prepared is half done. And in this case especially, it's true. The companies who are thinking about this, they should make first an assessment of whole country related to their own manufacturing products and the sector where they are. This means that firstly understand where are the industrial clusters, where the factories typically are, how are the logistics, what kind of incentives you might have here, exactly also the workforce availability, laws and regulations which are related to the products of energy prices, water prices, typical rental prices, typical building prices. So a whole lot of information which should be gathered before moving ahead. This makes a possibility to make decisions which are based in facts and not just hearings or anything like that. The one thing is to remember that starting an activity in Vietnam is not like starting an activity in China, nor in Europe or North America. There are its own specificities in the legislation, how you set up your companies. I think the very important things are also the incentives. Vietnam is providing incentives for investors who are setting up their activities in regions where the government sees needed more industry and which can provide a large amount of workforce, trained or semi-trained workforce typically. And there you can have tax cuts and things like that. At the same time, those regions might be a little bit outside of the capitals or the big clusters, but still reasonably near from logistics points of view. But gathering all this information, we speak very much about AI today. That's not the job for AI. It's not the job for anybody who is trying to gather all information from the websites. You need somebody who knows what is the situation and can update the latest information of that. Information is many times it's not available publicly. You need to ask for it for authorities, local or governmental authorities. Very much of the pricing information and things like that needs to be gathered from the agents, and it's not like in Western countries where you have very good statistics or anything. So you really need to work with people to get this information. And to do that, you need to be present here.
Okay, so looking at this initial assessment, preliminary study to understand the market, and within that market, understand where you have to go and why you should go in a certain area, make obviously a lot of sense. Now for companies that don't want to go through that, but will be willing to acquire an existing company, so purely M&A type of operations, is there also, you think, dynamics going in that trend into, okay, I'm going to spend some time, I'm going to vet and then audit factories, I'm going to maybe send my own team to also see how is it going with the operations, maybe hire an external consultant like a Outsource to have a guy really going there looking at the pure operations, so not only the financial aspects, but also how is the company structure, how does it work in terms of SOPs, processes, etc., to also provide an accurate valuation and offer that into investors or again industrial players that are looking to just acquire a company, that could also make sense to save time and to directly enter a market.
There are a lot of investments happening like this also. Whenever I ask a Vietnamese supplier, is your company for sales? They always say yes, but. So they are willing to sell also their operations. Then it's a question of pricing, customer base, and all these kind of things. And especially the operational level, the DDs for operations are very important in Vietnam, because finally you are buying some assets and also buying some customers and existing business at the same time in many cases. There are a lot of companies who are doing M&As, typically outside of Vietnam, some inside of Vietnam also, and that could be the fastest way to go on the market. But knowing Vietnamese companies, the negotiations might take very long time also, unless you go with a big bunch of dollars and there is nothing to discuss, just to make the papers. But that's very rarely happening. Yes, that is one way of doing. Which one is the best way? Set up your own operations or buying a factory? Very difficult to say. Depends of the strategy of the buyer also and how much they are willing to invest. Like I said, setting up an operation based on local workforce and rental premises and rental operations is quite cheap, in the matter of fact, comparing to buying a factory.
Yes, because looking at the offers here, you have industrial zones that have already built factories.
Yes.
So the thing that you have to do is basically bringing the machinery,
Yes.
hiring staff, and getting maybe your key people from your own operations for a production ramp up of 6 to 12 months probably. And after that, you are kind of ready to go and to take on the first orders.
Depends very much also about what kind of operation you have. It's like assembly type of operation where you are collecting components from other suppliers and then assembling them together. The needed premises are even more simple than a factory. So it can be like warehouses and things like that, 3,000 square meters, which has sufficient floor strength, and you bring quickly only the machinery in, you hire locally, and then you are very quickly up and running. You have to remember, of course, the Vietnamese climate. So you don't need very strong buildings, you don't need any insulations and things like that. A little bit of cooling, yes. Then you have the so-called ready-built factories, which are made by infrastructure investors, and you can get a brand new latest tech factory with all fire systems and social premises and everything, also again for rental, and there is everything between those. But those are very fast ways to enter to the market. Typically we have seen a lot of Chinese companies doing this. This especially because of the US tariffs and the image of China a little bit. Chinese companies are opening very rapidly operations here for manufacturing, and that manufacturing capacity is mainly used for exports to USA. The home factories back in China, they take care of the rest of the world then. A good example is one factory set up from China, which we saw. So the Chinese company set up in around 3 months a fully operational furniture factory. So what they did was that they rented rapidly premises. They brought all the machinery from China, like copying their existing manufacturing plant, and also brought in the beginning people from China to run the show. Then starting later to hire local people. Management in many cases, this kind of cases, in many cases is from China. They run the show, but the floor level workers and middle management is local. But this shows simply that it's very fast to do it. And this factory, for example, they concentrated only in exporting to USA, while the main factory in China took care of the rest of the world. Coming back to that M&A in Vietnam, so we are working together with companies who are handling M&As. So they have an existing database of available factories and time to time we are also offered factories, or we received information that we are selling this. I recently, just last week, got a proposal for a fully built factory for electronics and electronics assembly, which has not been used at all yet. So somebody has built a full setup and is selling it then. I think the price was less than 5 million.
Okay, Pietro, thanks for sharing about that.
Very
I think it
impressive.
gives us a very good understanding about the different steps and what are the options. If we are either just purely looking at partners, looking at suppliers to rent the capacity, to have an hybrid model where we can have either our own team to manage the operation, a type of assembly line, that could be also an option. And finally, of course, for the MNC probably or large SME that are looking at setting up full operation, then they understand a bit about how could be the steps that they should be taking.
We would be very happy to join the discussion before even the decision of outsourcing or making own manufacturing in Vietnam is done. Because all these informations, what we can give, could drive the customer in the right direction already from the beginning, from day one to long-term 5-year, 10-year decision making.
Thanks a lot, Pietro.
Thank you, Guillaume.
And I see you in the next video. Bye-bye.